All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indie Investor Pod. So excited for this podcast today. And this is the podcast. What we do is we just talk about indie real estate investing. So anything from tips, tricks, strategies, all these little things that can hopefully help any indie investor out there that is investing in real estate here in Indianapolis. And we're going international today, so I'm super excited about that. And with that, let's get on with the show. All right, and welcome back to another Indie Investor Pod. I am so excited to have our guest with us today. We got Or Kitchen, who is here from Israel. She is an investor here in Indianapolis, and I'm just going to get into a little bit more of her story later on and things like that, but really excited to have her on here with us today. So, Or, how are we doing?
Hi, Brian. We're doing great. I'm excited as well. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's kind of funny too. And these things happen all the time. So as Or and I got on here and we got on video, and it's kind of funny. I feel like we've talked about multiple properties and have had multiple communications through email, but I don't think we've ever actually talked like on and seen each other in person or virtual person or talk like that. So it's kind of funny how those things happen, but that's what the indie investor community I think is like sometimes. So, but great to have you on here. Great to see you face to face or virtually face to face and have these conversations. So awesome stuff. So, Or really, I want to kind of get into a little bit of kind of what you do and just your background and kind of how you got into investing and what you're doing now. So if you don't mind, let's kind of start there and let's hear a little bit of your origin story and how you got into it.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to tell it. So originally I am a software engineer. I had my degree. I was working in the industry for 7 years. I was a server-side developer. And I feel I got so lucky that I picked up one little tiny book called, how is it called? Do you know? Can you guess?
Oh, it's Robert Kiyosaki's. It's the Bible for everybody, right? So yeah,
it's the Bible. I was so far of it. I couldn't imagine it. I just read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, it was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening. I said to myself, oh my God, like this is the way to live. This is the way to live. How didn't I think about it before? And I started to invest in real estate in Israel. But real estate in Israel is very, very, very expensive, extremely expensive. We hardly make 3 to 4% ROI. That's even lucky. It's just crazy real estate over here. And lucky for me, again, I met a guy that was doing real estate in America. He was actually working in Ohio, in Cleveland. And he told me, well, you pay me a pretty fair amount of money, really not a lot, and I will teach you. I will teach you everything you know to invest in America. And I went for it. I met him in 2015. He taught me enough for actually one deal. I mean, he had a lot of experience, but I knew enough to buy one rental. And I chose my market as Indianapolis, and I went and I bought my first rental in Pike Township. And I'm so happy I bought this house. It's a great house. It's still a really good
I'm sure
house.
It's still doing very well there. So
yeah. Oh my God, it's doing so good. And the appreciation was skyrocketed.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome. It's kind of funny that you mentioned, Robert Kiyosaki's, Rich Dad, the whole series, and Rich Dad Poor Dad, and just that book and stuff is now it's like kind of graduation series over here. And, there are students that were graduating, they're having graduation parties because they couldn't have them with COVID earlier this year. But as my wife and I are like kind of writing checks out, we're like, maybe we should like include like the Rich Dad Poor Dad and like there's some books like that along with the gifts because that stuff is I think it's just so valuable. I don't know if they'll read it yet, but they need to read it sometime. So
it's so valuable. More people should know about it.
Yeah.
You're right.
So very cool. So yeah, so you bought that one, that rental property in Pike Township and then kind of growing from there. So when I think of you, and we had this conversation, when I think of you is you're kind of that connector, people that are, someone that is connecting properties with people that are selling properties here in Indianapolis to people that are investing, internationally, a lot in Israel and possibly Russia, I think you said too, and things. So that's kind of what I think of you. So tell me a little bit about kind of what you do, what your business model is and things like that. And then kind of, I know you've made a transition too. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, I'd love to hear it.
Yes, of course. So I will tell you, for quite a few years, what I did was, my career is not that long, 5 years, but still. So what I did, I was doing like wholesaling, but I call it like wholesaling par excellence. I was doing everything there is to do for the person, not like only, let's say what you do, you find the deal, you find the buyer, you connect them and you say goodbye, which is perfect. But what I did, but I couldn't just do it, because it's not that easy to do real estate when you live in Israel and to do it in America. Not only, I'm telling you, there's a language barrier. Even if I know English really good, there is still a language barrier. There's mentality, like we have different mentalities. And of course, knowing the city, knowing the people, knowing who to trust, knowing where to buy, knowing the process, the legal process, like taxes, there's a lot to it, that there's a whole process that especially people like us need to go through. So I was providing like the whole umbrella, finding the deal. I was actually doing the closing for them, like telling them, bring the money here, sign here, send it there, like everything. I was with the title agent, with the agents in the title, with the real estate agents. Then I was managing the rehab, and then I was pairing them with the property management companies that I was working with. I was never managing the properties. I never wanted to manage, but I was doing everything for them. And then, then it would be like, good luck, thank you for everything, off you go.
Yeah. So
yeah.
no, that's a lot of stuff to have on your plate to be able to managing all that, especially when you are overseas. And I think you usually come over to Indy like 4 times a year. I know this year's been a little crazy, but that's a lot of stuff to manage, when you are doing that, especially internationally and things, a lot of stuff on your plate. That's what I always like. Like you said, Brian buys properties, he sells properties. That's what he does. So
exactly.
That's what I'm good at. And that, I'll stick with that. So, and I know, but that's really neat of kind of what you're doing and you're connecting investors with there. And I know you have a lot of great relationships with people here in Indy. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of those connections and just kind of the relationships that can blossom out of that. So, and look at that on maybe 2 different ends. So for people that are from out of the country that are investing in Indianapolis, I'd like to kind of talk about some just advice you have for them or some tips you have for them. And then we'll look at the opposite way of like, hey, if you are in Indianapolis and you are selling properties, working with people that are out of the country, what are some tips we have for that? So let's start with that aspect of, if you are out of the country and you're trying to find properties in Indianapolis, you're working with Indianapolis investors over here, what are some tips and just some advice you have for those people?
Okay, great. Yes, I did. I actually have 3 tips for out of country buyers, but they're actually, though, they can be good for out of state buyers as well, but they're a bit more critical.
Okay.
1 second. Okay, yeah. Okay, so there is like this thing of exploring the city, exploring the city where you don't live. You don't live there. And for us, let's say for out of country people, they never even visited. It's not like even living in California, you're still 5 hours away by flight. And I know that a lot of people that do invest from California, they come at least once or twice, maybe when they start, maybe after they have properties already for 1 year, they still come to visit. And it's so much easier. I mean, for me, it's like 17 hours of flight, to come to America. And it's also like time difference and there's jet lag and like all of this going on, it takes me like roughly 1.5 days to arrive.
Oh, wow.
So I cannot just we cannot just hop on, we do it, but it's still not as easy to hop on a plane and come visit the market. But we still need to know the market and we still need to understand, the bad areas, the good areas, all the classes that we speak about usually, A, B, C, D, where are the war zones. We need to know these things because we see cheap property and we say, oh my God, this property is 30K, but we need to understand the meaning, of a fixed up property, all in, that's worth only 30K, it's not always clear.
Especially in Indianapolis, like I completely agree with that because like where I say, I talk to out of state investors or out of country investors all the time. And I say, hey, Indianapolis really is street by street. So when you're saying, hey, come over here, your first tip is like, just explore it, like get into it and understand kind of what's going on. Cause things look different on pictures or things look that are different on like heat maps of crime zones and things like that. When you're actually here in the city doing these things, I'm actually going to put a little plug in here because Randy and I's next episode of the Indie Investor Pod, we're going to talk about that. If you are an out-of-state investor, out-of-country investor, what do you do when you come to Indianapolis? Like, where should you go? What should you do? So it's a little shameless plug I'll put in here for the next episode.
No, it's okay. It's a great idea. People all the time ask me. All the time, oh, I'm going on a business trip to America, to my city. Let's say they invest all over, different cities. And I'm like, well, what should I do? Well, how to make it efficient. So it's a good idea.
Yeah. So
my first tip is like, when you start exploring Indianapolis, I think it's very important to cross-reference information. Because let's say an investor, so he wants to know the market. So he starts to speak with a lot of people and he speaks with Brian and he speaks with Matt and he speaks with John, and all of the people that are in the real estate, and different people have different opinions. Mm-hmm. And some people about the same area can tell me, oh my God, this is a war zone, don't go there. And someone else can tell me, no, this is a C-class area. That's okay. I mean, you can invest there. It's not the best area, but it's also not the worst area. you know, but by cross-referencing the information that you're getting and gathering as much info as we can, then you can actually decide, you know, then you can actually decide on a certain area that you want to invest in India. I mean, the most important thing is don't go with the first advice you get and don't go with the second advice you get. It's like gather all the info you can and cross-reference. If a lot of people have the understanding, tell you the same thing, then it's probably true. Let's say, I mean, the most vivid example now, it's like 40-second and post, you know, like everyone in India, that's the first thing they tell you. 38 and 42nd and Post Road, that's not a good place to be in. That's like a war zone. Even though around it, I saw like, I mean, even though like, you know, to go a bit to the west and then go to the east.
Yeah,
I
completely
see
different. Yep.
Completely different. Properties are selling all the time. And I've seen their appreciation in the last 5 years. I was very surprised. I mean, prices really went up. But still, like, that's a vivid example. Everybody knows that this area is not so good. And everybody would probably tell you about Martindale and Brightwood and other areas. So, but it isn't important to cross-reference.
Right. I like it.
Yes. Okay, I have another tip. So this is for buy and hold investors. This is about property management companies. I mean, really, from, oh my God, like bitter experience, you know, with PMs. I would suggest to interview like at least 3 property management companies and make sure to find out everything that you can, which means like all the fees that the landlord has to pay. There are certain fees that we all know ahead, like, you know, the placement fee and the monthly management, but different companies have much more fees than I could imagine. You know, so you really need to ask, like, what are all the fees that I'm gonna pay during the year? You know, things like that. About repair policy, it's really important to ask about their maintenance policy and whether you have the possibility to send your own contractor to have something fixed. Because, I mean, we would think that it's something like legitimate, you know, I would think to myself, why can't I send my own, you gave me a quote for 3,000. Okay, I want to send my own contractor to check, you know, to give me a quote. But there are actually some property management that would give you a hard time to do it. They won't tell you, no, you can't. But oh my God, they would give you like such a hard time until you can actually send someone to do the fix for you. So, and there are like plenty other things. And I was working with a few property management and I was like really horrified. I'm telling you, like horrified by the things that I had to go through and by the things I was charged. So I have a whole checklist of questions, like 30 questions. And if anyone wants it, no problem, just tell me. I would be happy to send it to anyone that wants, like 30 questions from my bitter experience of how to handle property management.
Yeah, I love it. And if you don't mind, actually, you can send that to me and I'll put it, you know, I can put the link on when I put this podcast out, or I know you'll be tagged in it as well and they can reach out to you directly so you can.
Great. I'd love to. I send it to you. No problem.
Yeah, no. And that's one of the advice I like to give too, when people are working with property managers or interviewing property managers too. One of the things I always ask is like, hey, can you like give me a couple of your people that work with you so I can reach out to them directly to see, you know, to ask them some questions. And just as a, you know, can you have that third party, you know, just reference point of like, hey, how, you know, how are they, what are things that you're careful for, you know, just all that type of stuff. I think it's really important. So yeah, great advice, Or.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So any other tips for just the out of country investors that are looking for properties here in Indianapolis?
Yes, I just like one more tip, which is about, actually, this is about relationships. So let's say an investor decides to go to invest in real estate in the US for the long term. Yeah, it's not like only for one property or 2 property or one fleet. You know, you decide to do it for a long term. So the natural thing to do, and everyone do it, there's no choice, to form business relationships, right? We'll do it. So the advice is whether you work with the people that you work, whether it's a realtor, a GC, a wholesaler, or any other person that you create your relationship with, make sure that the offer that you make or the offer that you receive is a good offer. I mean, this offer must be beneficial to the other party, and it must be beneficial to you as well. I mean, the partnership or the business relationship, it needs to be kind of a win-win situation, you know, for it to go a long way. Because I had a business partnership and business relationship in India that sometimes they were not fair to me, and sometimes they were not fair to the other party. I didn't realize it, I didn't know. It's only with experience I knew that it wasn't beneficial for the other party, and it never works.
Yeah.
When it's not really win-win for both sides, it breaks. It always breaks, So now when I come to form a business relationship, I think about it ahead. I think to myself, I need to make an offer to this person, but this offer, it needs to be good. It needs to be good for them, and it needs to be good for me. Like we both need to feel that we are beneficial from.
Yeah, definitely. When it's not that win-win situation, it's usually just gonna be that one-time transaction. When it
Exactly.
is a win-win for each, it can be multiple transactions, and that's what it's all about.
And then when it's not one win-win, it usually is. It survives only one or two.
Yeah.
But when it's a good one, it can go really a long way.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I love it. So let's look at the other side of that now then. And let's say that you're an investor in Indianapolis, or a contractor, or a wholesaler, or just anybody that's maybe selling properties or working with people that are out of the country. So investors that are out of the country, what are some advice for you? What's some advice that you have for the people that are here in Indy working with the out of country or even out of state investors?
Okay, great. So yes. There is something important to understand. Let's say in my country, we don't have such thing as wholesaling. It's almost not, you know what, I'm not sure, but I never heard about it. When I was doing real estate here, there are people that are selling off market, but it's not like, it's something, so it's like a jungle, it's really, really not, no one knows about it. Everyone can do whatever they want. It's not really like precise like it is in America, that everyone knows what a wholesaler is, and most of the people know how to work with them. And, most of the people know they have their own contracts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I think the most important is like help, and now I'm talking about out of country, help them understand the process of purchasing the property with the wholesaler. Because there is a lot of misunderstanding about the earnest money, about the inspection, about the liabilities of a wholesaler, or about, the obligations of each party. So just try to help them understand what it means to work with a wholesaler. And how this process looks, because the process is different than buying a property on the MLS or buying, with a realtor. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be really, really beneficial and helpful for a lot of people that are coming out of country and that are not really used to this concept of wholesaling.
Yeah. So I think that's really important for anybody that is here. If you are a wholesaler and you're working with people that are out of state, and really, if you're working with an buyer, it could be somebody here in Indianapolis. One of our first questions is always like, "Hey, have you bought through a wholesaler before? Do you understand the process?" Like, because not everybody knows that, and sometimes maybe they've done it before, but maybe it's been a couple of years and they just need to explain to. So yeah, that's great advice. I like that.
Yes, so exactly. Even people in America, some of them don't know how. I would assume that even in America, some people wouldn't know how to work with wholesalers. So first of all, to make sure they understand the process. So later on, like I know so many people in Israel that said, "What? I can't believe I can't get my earnest money back." And I'm like, "But did he say that earnest money is non-refundable?" And you know what? They didn't understand the meaning of non-refundable. Right. Or they thought maybe it's non-refundable only in case that. And I'm like, no, it's just never. It's always non-refundable. I mean, you cannot get your earnest money now because this is the deal that you made. So, different things like that. And I think another good thing would be like to educate a bit about the city and how it behaves. You said it exactly. Indy is special. It is street by street. I would call it block by block. And it's not an easy market to understand. It's really not an easy market to understand at all, especially when we don't live there and we cannot just scroll the streets and look what's going on. Even the comps, they're not always tell you what exactly going on. If I wouldn't have someone that always would go and check the property for me and tell me, okay, look, the street is not so good, or the street is okay, I wouldn't be able to work. So I think like educating a bit about the city and explaining about the different areas and explaining that the city behaves like really block by block. You can have a block with 400K, property selling and drive 3 minutes south and you would be in a completely different area. Yeah. So, and it helps to create trust.
Yeah.
So, when a wholesaler doesn't just jump on you and tell you, buy my deal, it's a good deal, it's a great house, it's under market value, 20%, buy it. This doesn't instill trust. What instills trust is like, okay, let me explain to you. This is the city, this is how it behaves, this area is C, this area is B, I wouldn't buy in this area, my deal is like that. Does it suit you? Okay. If it doesn't suit you, but this opens the gate, to future transactions. And
yeah. So I think that's really
I
important. I
would
think
really
it's one thing to
appreciate
kind of
it.
like just put out there too, just make sure that if you are, so as you're talking about, people understanding the city and where things are and the education of the city, making sure that the person that you're getting the property from, they've been educated on it too. They know kind of what the property is and what they talk about. Just because I would say that's always like kind of a disclaimer I throw out there and just a warning of like, there are so many virtual wholesalers out there now where it's somebody living in Florida or somebody living in Texas that are selling properties here, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when that investor needs to be like, hey, can you tell me about this area of what's really going on? The person you're buying it from might not either. So make sure you are asking those questions, which is really important. Yeah. And it's Indy is a special city, and it's so hard to, kind of explain to people that haven't been here and haven't seen it and stuff. I just had a friend come up from Cincinnati the other day and just kind of hang out with me, and we're just talking business. And as he was just on the outer belt, and he went from, 74 from Cincinnati up to Fishers. And he's like, wow, Indy's a pretty new city. You guys don't have very many old homes around here. I'm like, no, that was just that part through. Like, drive downtown and you'll see the, 1800 houses and the 1900 houses. So they're in there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. So let's get into a little bit of, so when I know you said you talked to somebody in Cleveland and they were in there, and you decided to invest in Indianapolis and stuff. So what was that selling point for you of like why you picked Indy? And then when you're talking to, out of country investors and you're trying to talk to them about investing in Indianapolis, what are some of the selling points that you sell them on? Like why Indy? Why is it such a great market to invest in?
Okay. Great. I will tell you. I gotta tell you, in 2015, there were hardly Israeli people in Indianapolis. I didn't know anyone. I knew maybe one more guy that was investing, and all the people I was speaking with, they were like, "Oh you're the first person in Israel I ever speak with. Oh, so much fun." I mean, the market wasn't so popular. But last year, or this and last year, if you notice, how many people from Israel are coming to invest in Indianapolis? I mean, it became so popular. So it didn't really change. I will tell you what, I think what changes the Israeli mentality. You know how hard it is to make this leap of faith to invest overseas. So maybe
I just attributed it all to you. I was just like, oh man, Or's just doing a great job. She's killing it. Bringing everybody to Indy.
It's told me. No, but actually it is Indy after all. But okay, so there are two things. I think a lot of people also, not even in Israel, in Europe and everywhere, understands that real estate in America is really good, that the laws are in favor of the investors, that taxation is really, it's good. It's in the favor of the investor. And but there is a leap of faith, to make, like, oh my God, I'm gonna put all this money, and I never saw the property, I never saw the people I work with, I have to trust these people, and I don't know what is going on. So this was a process, and I think a lot of people have went through this process and they're open to it. And now Indy. So when I was picking out Indy, there's something that is really she's got going for her, which is growing population. She has like a steady growing population and a variety of jobs. It's like it's not like, there's a lot of jobs to offer. There's a lot of variety. There's FedEx, Eli Lilly, and I don't remember, but I mean, there's a lot of things that go for Indy, in the industry wise. And of course, the unemployment, for years, let's say if we ignore what happened with COVID-19 now, which hit all of America, it has really low unemployment rate. I think it was 3.9 before all the mess with the pandemic started, which means that the city and the state, the state is in really good place. But most important, really, is the entry point. The entry point to come and buy here, even a flip and even a rental property, is pretty low. And because the entry point is low, the ROI is high. You don't see everywhere this kind of ROI, and it just makes people to flock here. It just makes people flock at the gates because they think, okay, now let me say that it's not all that great. You have it very good. It very well. There's ROI on paper and there's ROI in real life.
Yeah.
Which has nothing to do with each other.
Yeah. So
it's completely two different things.
Yeah. No, it's kind
Yes,
of funny is what, talking with investors from Israel or, from New York or, Colorado or, places like that, Hawaii, just different out of state investors, out of country investors where they're like, wait, I can buy a property there and rent it for 750 and I can buy it for $50,000. Like it's ready to go.
exactly.
Like it's like, it is a little bit of like, yeah, really like you like, they're like, is it torn down? Like, is there like a wide open
No
wall?
one believes it. No one can
Yeah,
believe that you can actually buy property and you can actually make that rent amount on the house. I know, and that's I think the strongest thing that Indy and actually the Midwest, but we are talking about
right.
Indy now, that has going for it.
Yeah.
Like this really low entry point that people can afford it.
Yeah. So no, and you brought up some really good points there. Just the entry point is always the number one thing, especially for people where it is just cheaper to invest here than where they live with a lot of places. But when you get back to that unemployment rate, which is phenomenal, we'll talk about before all this because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to
Exactly.
shake
We
out.
don't know
Yeah.
yet how it's going to
But
play out.
if you were anywhere around Indy in the last year, you've noticed all the construction going on. Like it's just
Oh my
new
God.
builds going up everywhere, just
Oh my God.
renovations going up everywhere. But we were still to the point where for every basically new house that was being built, there were 2 jobs available in Indy or 2 jobs being offered. So the job market is such a great place. There's a lot of companies that for the same reason that people invest in Indianapolis is for single family homes or multifamily homes or multifamily and stuff like that. The same thing for businesses. It's a lot easier to operate a business here than it is in California or it is in New York and stuff. So there are businesses that
I
are growing
know.
here as well, which is bringing a lot of jobs and a lot of people that need to rent or own homes, which is great. So
Exactly. It's flourishing. India is really flourishing in this sense. And it's a good feeling when you know that your tenant is going to have a job.
yeah.
Makes you feel good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. So that's awesome. So we are running a little bit low on time, but so I'm just gonna ask you one kind of just open-ended question here, or we'll
Yes.
finish it off with just like kind of what's that one little maybe last piece of advice or tip or just anything that a positive thing about Indy that it has going for us that you can just throw out there to just kind of maybe entice or talk to investors about.
Yes. So, okay, first of all, I have seen this crazy appreciation in few areas that were considered rental. This last 3 years, it's been, I mean, really amazing. I wasn't able to buy now properties, let's say in the beginning of 2020, like the properties that I could buy in 2016. So there was quite an appreciation in the city. And you know what? I really want to say something flipping wise, and you said it as well. There's a lot of flipping activity going on in areas where I would never believe, that flipping would be done there. I mean, I wasn't even buying rentals there. And, I'm talking about West Indy, Mars Hill, and even Riverside. I mean, there in Riverside, flip selling, not everywhere, of course. It's a very, very complicated place for me, because I live far away. But there is an area there that flips are selling for 120 and 110. And would you believe it about Riverside like a year ago or like 2 years ago?
I didn't want to. I wasn't going to buy in. Like the people wanted, like we've been selling a lot of properties in Riverside, and I just never believed, like, oh no, it's never going to end up being a flipping market and stuff. But it is, and we got one going on there right now. So it's.
Oh, you got the one.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know. I was shocked because I did a flip in Mars Hill and on Riverside, and my friends, they did flips in West Indy, and the houses are selling, and they're selling really well. And I mean, I couldn't believe it. But I think, first of all, this is great, because now the entry point for flipping is not that expensive. I mean, I had flips on College Street, and I needed to put 200K, to do a flip over there. Mm-hmm. But now, let's say if you want to come to India and do let's say not a home run, but a small kind of flip, you don't need 200K anymore. You can do it for less in those areas, which I think this is like such a huge plus for the city. And the best thing, that it's making those areas look much better, and less neglected than they are. Because for me, I couldn't believe it. When I came to Indy first time, there are such beautiful areas, really beautiful areas. And then I was driving up streets and just all neglected, boarded up. And I mean, it looked so bad. I was like, I couldn't believe like this whole street, this whole block in this huge city is completely neglected. It's very rare to see it in Israel, but that's because we are very small space and a lot of population.
Yeah.
So like, vacancies are very low because people need a place to live, but it's different in India. And then I started, to come more and flip more, which actually I didn't say, but I shifted my occupation, and now I'm not doing rentals anymore. I'm doing only flipping and new construction. You know why? Less of a headache.
I understand you right there.
You understand. It's so much fun. Build a house and sell it. Make a house and sell it, and never to deal with it again.
Yeah. So. That's why you have that list of 30 things to ask property managers, because you're like, I'm not going to do this anymore. No. So.
Once I wrote it, I said, oh my God, why am I doing this?
So.
But all the flipping, I see how the streets are turning. I even come to I see a really bad street, and then me and my partner, we come and we renovate 3 houses over there, and that's it. The street looks so much better.
Yeah.
So I think it's better for the city, just to brighten it up.
Yep, definitely. So I love it. No, really good stuff, Or. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll definitely tag her on when I put this out on social media and stuff like that. So if you need to reach out to her, you can definitely do it that way as well. So you can connect with her there if you have any questions or any follow-up things for her. And just with that, just thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and some just great content that you provided here today. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian.
And for that, that's another episode of the Indie Investor Pod. We'll see you guys next time.